Already. Okay, guys, the day is finally here. I mean, it's been almost 5 days since I posted on Monday that I'm going to meet one of the best people in Ghana when it comes to design and branding, and he's sitting right next to me. He goes by the name Daniel Ampofo. I'm going to link all of his numerous brands and other pages on Instagram, social medias like Twitter and Facebook. Do you have Snapchat?
Oh yeah, I do. I don't really post, but I do.
Daniel is a very reserved person, so he being on Snapchat is a big deal. So today, like I said, the topic is thinking beyond the logo. Okay. Thinking beyond the logo. For a while now, I've been thinking of how brands can evolve past their logo, how they can make impact and also draw the audience attention without necessarily using the logo. But then I've been thinking of it from the flip side. How can designers start to consider these type of things when they're designing logos? So then I was thinking, who would be the right person to talk to about something like this? I needed somebody who had spent a lot of time in the industry working on brands, building amazing brands that have won several awards. And the person that came to my mind was Daniel Ampofo. I mean, he's the right person, has a whole lot of awards on his belt, build very complex brands and develop very complex strategies that doesn't only make brands stand out, but make them meet their business goals and have really massive results online. Like I said, I'm going to link everything down in the description so you can check him out and give him some love. Tell him Joshua sent you. So today, we are getting into the topic. The topic, like I said, is thinking beyond the logo. So, my boss.
Thank you for putting me on your channel. I mean, I've been trying to dodge this, but
you can dodge this.
Yeah, it looks like. I mean, when you told me, I was just in the house thinking, "Hey, Charlie, what trouble has this guy found for me?" But I think that is a conversation that needs to be had, yes, especially because of the kind of space that we find ourselves in. So I believe that thinking beyond the logo today, we are really going to learn a number of things that is going to change how we think about branding and how we think about identities in general, right? So maybe I just go right ahead and then, so there are a couple of images I'll be showing. I put together a very simple slide just to engage whoever is watching. So I think that the various pages will be shown in the video as we go, right? Okay. So maybe you'll be the person I'll be using for this simple exercise, nice. Yeah, that's simple routine that I want us to go through. So I mean, when I display the image, you can tell me what brand you think it is, right? Okay. Yeah. So what brand is this?
The future is exciting. For me, I can identify this straight away.
Okay.
Because of the big 6 thing that I'm looking at. I don't know if it's a quotation mark or if it's a number 6, but I would say it's a quotation mark. Okay. And it's a Vodafone.
Okay. All right. So let me switch to the next one.
Coca-Cola.
Okay. Let me go to the next one.
This sad face there. Interesting.
What brand do you think this is?
YouTube.
Okay. And I think this is the last one. Which brand do you think this is?
Oh, KFC.
All right. So
finger looking good.
All right. So I deliberately did this very simple exercise because I just wanted us to get a sense of where we are going with our conversation. So if you look at the slides, the first one is Vodafone. The second one is definitely Coca-Cola. The third one is YouTube, like he rightly said, and then we have KFC. Now, for these examples, what you notice is that for every image I put here, there was no logo on it, and you'd realize that most of them were.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, most of them were the color red.
Yes,
pretty much, right? Yeah, most of them were color red. I think maybe it's Vodafone that had a bit of the logo in there, but for most of these brands, you are able to tell right from looking at the imagery or right from just looking at the picture I put up that this is a particular brand, right? And so it leads me to a very important conversation that we want to have about identities or about logos. Okay, let me start with logos, right? I always say that logos are usually for 3 main things. They are for awareness, discovery, and then recognition.
Okay.
Right, those are the main things that logos are for. They only create awareness of a brand. They only let people see how a brand looks like, and then they are usually for recognition, right? But on their own, they don't really say anything. So a lot of times I find that logos are too overrated. they are too overrated. I mean, in this day and age, someone sits up, says, "Okay, Charlie, I'm going to cook up a very conceptual logo. I need to nail it, and then have a 3-page rationale in addition to the logo, and then do all of that." Yeah, and I find that it's a good thing, all right, but I think that we overrate the importance of the logo or the symbol itself. I think that a lot of times we think too much about the symbol that we are not able to look beyond the symbol.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, a lot of times when you are creating an identity, the most important bit of the identity is what happens beyond the logo that you have created.
Right.
Okay. So that it doesn't end there. So even these days, we are saying that logos are actually becoming fluid and dynamic. There are a number of brands that are developing identities that are evolving. So they don't even look the same every single time. I think you and I have been working on a project like that. we are developing.
You know, I love dynamic identities.
we developed an identity that's also very dynamic.
Yes.
And so these days, I think that people confine their minds too much to how strong the logo should be, or they overplay the importance of the logo. I mean, I'm not saying that the logo isn't important.
Yes,
don't get me wrong.
Okay.
It is very important. It's an essential part of the brand because, like I said in the beginning, it makes awareness easier, it makes discovery easier, it makes recognition easier. But then, with this conversation, we are looking at being able to think beyond just the logo that you have created. If you look at the examples I put up, most of them we didn't even see the logos itself. Just by looking at the images, we were able to get a sense of what brand that they were, right? So that is why I am making the case for whatever conversation I'm saying. So then I actually really think that we don't need to think logos. We need to think identity systems.
Okay.
And when I say identity systems, then I mean that we need to be able to find ways of using these logos so that it runs through. It goes beyond just the fact that we are putting a logo on a design or on an image. Or mock-ups and all of that.
That's a popular one. You get the logo on the mock-up.
Slap the logo on the mock-up and you're done. Yeah, but you need to
see the client.
Exactly. But you need to be able to create something, a system where that transcends beyond the logo. So you don't just have to look at the logo and say that, okay, this is the brand, but then something else needs to be added, and we'll talk about some of these things that we can add up that will make a brand living. And so I say that when we look at a logo and identity, we need to go the extra mile.
Yeah.
A brand is every other thing, with the logo even inclusive of that, right? So I think branding is everything that you do as a service or as a product, right? If you're a product, branding is everything about you. I say it is the looks, the sounds, the emotions, the experience, the beliefs, the vibe. The vibe that someone gets. And then we can look at the typeface, colors, the patterns, images, language. In fact, everything about a product or service is a brand, right? So then we need to be after we are done creating the logo, we need to be able to think about the other things that follow, right? If we don't think about the other things that follow the identity, I mean every other thing that is part of the identity, then we have not been able to achieve what we will consider in quote perfect branding. I think that every brand beyond the logo needs to consider every single thing that goes beyond that. So I think everything else, from the looks, the sounds, the emotions, the experiences they create, the beliefs, the vibe, the typeface, the color, the patterns, the image, the language, every single thing that revolves around the brand. So for instance, we are in the room here, and we hear someone passing and we are hearing poppy. Naturally, that is the brand that comes to mind. It's a very good example of it is part of the identity system, right? It's a very good example, and that is thinking beyond the logo, because at that point people are not even really seeing you, they're only hearing the thought.
But the funny thing about that is I really doubt it was planned. I have a feeling it's something that culturally became relevant over the years.
Yes, I do agree. I think that sometimes you can only go so far in terms of how well planned you are as a brand. But I think it even goes beyond farm milk. It's like the way you would also you'd hear someone passing by and knocking scissors together, and then when you hear that sound, you hear cook sound, and then you are thinking that it could either be a shoemaker. Oh, no, it could even be a tailor, right?
Okay, yeah.
Now, when you hear someone knocking something against a box, then you are definitely thinking that, okay, that is a shoemaker.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So you realize that for a number of people, that things that we don't even consider as brands, they have been able to create systems for themselves that give them easy recognition consistently, because they have done it over so long. Yeah. So that is why even the sounds are important to an identity. The typeface, the color, the patterns. Like with the Coca-Cola image I showed, the text was happiness, but it had a very white strip across it, and so just by seeing that white strip across it, you definitely knew that it was Coca-Cola. And those are some of the things that you need to look at and think around when you are developing an identity for a brand. And all of these things come into play when you know the kind of people you are trying to reach with your brand. It also forms an integral part. So I was having a conversation with a friend, and then we were discussing some of these logos, and I was telling him, I mean, when you look at the Nike logo, typically, what does a Nike logo mean to you? It might not really mean anything to you. Just a switch. When you look at the Apple's logo, what does that logo mean to you? What does the Vodafone logo mean to you? What does the Farm Milk logo mean to you? Really, when you look at the logo, what does it mean to you? Naturally, it always doesn't really mean much to you.
Yeah.
But then it is the other things that add up to the brand that really makes sense to you.
Out the emotion.
That brings out the true meaning of the brand, or what the brand even stands for. And so that is why I am saying that logos are too overrated.
I get you. Makes perfect.
It goes beyond just that. And so I would want to say that it is very important that as a brand you take advantage of all your touch points consistently. So when I say touch points, I mean the point at which clients come into contact or interface with your brands. On social media, your billboards in town, maybe your radio ads. I mean, every way they are reaching or they are connecting with you as a brand is a touch point, right? And so you need to be able to leverage on all of these touch points to be consistently be able to push your identity system. Like I'm saying, not just a logo. It could be how certain patterns move. It could be the typeface or the font, as we sometimes say. It could be the colors, even the tone of the colors, the hue of the colors. All of those little things play an important part of a brand. So
especially imagery.
Yes, an imagery, exactly. Even the way the images are shot. I mean, for a very long time, one of the brands I really liked their imagery was Coca-Cola. When you look at them, you naturally can tell that this is Coca-Cola.
Very warm looking images.
Yeah, very warm looking. You are able to detect the happiness vibe right from their imagery. So it's very important that at every point in time, at every point that you are interfacing with your consumers, you need to make sure that you are selling your identity system through it, and not just putting a logo at the corner and saying that you have completed.
One funny thing I noticed about Coca-Cola ads is that they're extremely targeted at black people, especially the ones in our area. Because I don't remember the last time seeing a Coca-Cola in our region which had a white person in there.
Yes,
always.
It is so true. I think for them, one of the things they do very well at is being able to localize the kind of brand that they have built. That is why they went as far as doing share cook with Ama, share cook with Kojo, share cook with. I think it's because they like to really personalize their brand, because, like I'm saying, branding too also has different target markets or different groups of people. I remember even Diet Coke and Coke Zero were actually targeted at two different groups of people. I think one was targeted at men and one was targeted at women. Meanwhile, they were pretty much the same product. So they are very smart at looking at who they want to reach and how they get to reach their person, and it's very essential for the kind of brand that they are building for themselves. So on my way here, I consumed over 50 brands, right? Immediately I sat in the car and it drove away. I saw a billboard, that was a brand, that was a different brand. I saw another car in front of me, which was a different brand. I probably saw someone wearing a shirt, that was a brand. I can say unconsciously I kept consuming different brands, right? So it means that day in and day out we are consuming so many brands, and it goes beyond the logos that they have created. For some of them you wouldn't even see the logo at a glance, but what are these brands doing to make sure that when I see them naturally, I'm able to create a certain connection with them. Like the way with like the way KFC would design their signage on my way here, I saw a KFC. They will design their signage with a bucket. Right, and so immediately you are getting even if the logo wasn't on the bucket and you saw a red and white bucket, naturally it is KFC. That comes to mind. And so as we move, we are consuming brands as we move. On a daily, we are consuming 100, 200 brands. Immediately we open social media and we scroll for 30 seconds. We have probably consumed about 30 brands already. And so it is so important that you are able to think beyond just one simple mark, that is a logo. You're able to think beyond that, even in terms of how you are going to write your words, your language as a brand. There's a language that you see that naturally you say, okay, I think it's this brand, even without them having to put their logo on there. So it's important that in crafting an identity, we are talking more of the visual bits of an identity, but in crafting an identity, you need to be able to pay a lot of attention to every other thing beyond, beyond, because that's the conversation we're having. Beyond the logo, we need to be able to pay attention to all of those little things so that you are able to create a better design system, right? So for me, for instance, one of the things I always make sure I do in the identities I create is I always pick certain elements from the logo and make them run through the entire design. They could be some shapes or lines in there. I'm probably creating patterns with the logo, or I'm creating some abstract lines that I'm picking elements of it from the logo, so that subconsciously when you keep getting in contact with the brand and you're seeing some of these lines, till we get to a point where we say, okay, we are doing a creative where the logo is not a part of it. You're able to naturally know that this is a brand that.
Do you have any brand around you can show us?
Oh yeah, there are a couple of projects that maybe after that I think you'll be able to share links of some of these projects
so people can look at it,
so that people can take a look at them, or maybe we'll run through one or two projects as well.
I mean, whatever is good with you,
and then we'll look at one. So someone said, I don't know who said that, but I saw it somewhere.
Someone said,
but so that's
someone is always wise. Someone is always smart.
Someone said, remove your logo and your customers should still know it's you. And that was what I proved with the first 5 slides that I shared.
Remove the logo,
took out the logos, and then you were still able to identify the brands that you have there. Even though it is not easy to do, I mean, usually happens over a period of time. I think that you need to be able to build a brand that is so robust and that is so consistent that immediately we take the logo out, you're able to really identify what kind of brand it is. So I think that I've been able to do justice to our topic.
I think
beyond the logo.
I think so. And
it
makes a lot of sense.
We can look at any questions that you might have.
So just a little recap based on everything we've said so far. You made a really strong point by starting the presentation with making me look at a couple of images by different brands. One takeaway is that all the brands had the same color, red, right? So, I mean, usually people argue that one way to differentiate, the easiest way to differentiate is to have different colors, right? So if I'm a food company and my rival uses red, I should definitely not use red because it will look the same, right? But then in this case, they were all red, but I was still able to clearly tell how different it was.
Yes, 100%.
Yes, so I feel like you've even brought about something new that we as designers can think of, that sometimes even using the same color, there are other things you can consider differentiating the logo. You went on to talk about how we consume a lot of brands and how we can also use the consistency to improve how our other languages, like our smell, our look, our feel, our sound, our text, our images and everything plays along the logo to add our identity and make us more vibrant. So it makes a lot of sense. One thing, so we are getting into the questions now. Some of these questions are from people online. Some of these questions are things that I also thought about myself. First on my list, most of the brands you showed us, right? Coca-Cola, KFC, all of these brands are brands that have existed for a while, right? But you could think of this back then, right? Why is it so relevant in 2019? I mean, in 2020. Sorry about that. In 2020, why is it so important that people start to think beyond the logo, especially now.
Yeah. So like I was saying, I think so. Even back in the day, the channels of communication were not as much as they are now. Right now, there are so many of them. I mean, even just social media platforms.
Yes.
There's trailer now. When TikTok came not too long ago, I mean, they keep coming up. Even for us who are young, who are in the social media era, even for us, we are losing track of the number of channels that are coming. There are so many channels now, and so it is making it
very more
difficult to even penetrate the system in the first place. So that is why it is extremely important that you don't even have to think about just your logo, because sometimes people are too busy, they might not even see the logo in the first place. They might probably come across maybe an ad that you have done, that they are probably on social media scrolling and then they just want to move away.
Hate ads.
Yeah. Yeah, but then so that is the thing. So it means that you need to be able to create a system that is so good that maybe within very few minutes or very few seconds, someone is able to get something out of it. One of the things that has become very important, even when you want to do advertising, is to be able to get people to stop.
Yes,
is an extremely important bit of advertising.
Even for 5 seconds.
Yes, you need to be able to get people to stop, because when people are driving, they are seeing billboards. They are, like I'm saying, they are feeding their brains with over 100, 200, 300 brands. If you're able to do something that is really different from what they are consuming day in and day out, then you're able to get them to stop.
Yeah.
Right, because then they are seeing something that is totally different. So, for instance, if we were in a room, all of us were in our t-shirts, right? And someone walks we were in a room of 100 people. We were all in red shirts, red t-shirts around it. And someone walked into the room wearing a bright yellow shirt. Automatically, all of us would tend to look at the person.
Probably think he's in the wrong room.
Exactly. That's how the brain works. So, in creating an identity is very important. I think it's the reason why a lot of people pay so much attention to the logo. But I think that it's important that you create elements that are different, so that even if your colors are probably within the same spectrum, there are other elements that are making you so different from the others, and that is able to grab people's attention easily. So right now we are in the attention grabbing space. It's the reason why even for some of these old brands, you realize that as time goes on, they also keep evolving. They keep tweaking their logos, changing things, making small adjustments here, making small adjustments here. The truth is that even right now, I believe that we even maybe I'm being a bit daring, but I think that we are even moving towards a point where we can't even think so much of saying that I want to develop a logo that can last for 50 years. I actually think that now it's not even realistic. It's not even really a realistic goal. That is what I think.
I mean, now that you mention it, I mean, there are brands that have survived with multiple different styles of logo.
Exactly.
That doesn't it's not consistent in its basic form.
Exactly.
But you still know it's them.
100%.
I mean, MTV is a really big
yes, it's a big
the logos are made of donuts. Sometimes made out of space cheese. Some very weird and quirky elements.
Google also did it with their doodles that they kept changing. So I don't even think that now it's a matter of thinking about developing a logo that can last you for 10, 20, 30 years. No. I think that right now it's about building a system rather that can last you that long, and the logo itself can even evolve or change or go through some variations as time goes.
That is a very interesting topic.
that is what
it's a very interesting topic.
I think. So I think we can move on to the next question.
So you mentioned something that is also a part of the next question. You talked about developing elements, right? And for the people watching, I'm trying to be a darling, okay? So you guys don't have to go all the way to the description, find some projects, open them. Probably your internet data, your data might be slow or it's getting finished. I mean, I'm talking to the people who are in Sub-Saharan Africa. We are all dealing with internet issues right now. So I have your back. So talking about elements, right? I want people to have a visual idea of what you mean by having other elements support your logo. Having other things aside the logo help the brand speak louder.
Sure.
So we're looking at things that maybe the color, some kind of patterns or shapes, or even wording itself or imagery. So is there any brand that you worked on in the past that you would like to take us through?
I think there are a couple of them I'd want to share. Maybe one is a very recent project that I'm working on. Let me quickly find it and project it on the screen.
It's a honey.
I think the first brand that I love this brand a lot because it was by a friend of mine. It belongs to a friend of mine, and I think you're part of it too.
Well, no.
Partially.
Sort of.
Well, it's a collaborative thing.
Yes,
so,
it's very collaborative. It's funny you brought this up because it's one of the things I had in mind.
Okay,
I saw the one, it was lovely.
Yeah, so I love Adepa Weddings because one, it was for it's a wedding photography brand. And I like the fact that we didn't do the traditional lenses and all of that.
The signatures and things like that.
I really went for something that was totally different. Just decided to stick with the typeface for this brand. And when you look through the system that I created, I mean, typically, we do the one color version, and then we do the actual colors. And then majority of the time, I do a simple write-up of what thought process went into why I did what I did, and even how I picked my colors, how I sampled the colors that I used, even the apps that I use Piccolo, I use Adobe Capture, picking up typical luxury weddings, and then I picked the color themes from them, and then I put them together, and then I always definitely have a page for my colors and then my typefaces. And I like to look at the application, especially because we are talking about thinking beyond the logo. I don't even want to pay so much attention to the logo that was created, but rather to go beyond that and look at the overall system that
was used.
And how it was used. And so this brings me to the very first page where I created a pattern out of the logo. So these are elements in the actual logo that I put together and form the pattern with it.
This is beautiful.
And so consistently, if this pattern is used in so many scenarios, you realize that we could definitely get to a point where when we take out the Adepa Weddings logo from there,
you can see the
just by looking at these patterns, seeing the swells and all of that, you can totally tell that this is Adepa Wedding. We can have our call card and say, okay, on the back of our call card, we are just going to print this pattern, and people will easily be able to relate to the brand. And so if you look at a few things in terms of print, you realize that I kept using bits and pieces of the elements. For me, I really love to do this a lot. I pick elements and parts of the logo, and then I run them through the creatives. So for the notebook, you see that the pattern is all over the front, and I'm picking certain bits and pieces of it and putting them on the letterheads, the envelopes, the call cards, and all of that. And you realize that naturally, after some time, when you see this, your mind is drawn to Adepa Weddings as a brand, and for me that is also very important for me. Like I'm saying, that it is always important that you think beyond the logo and look at ways and means. So for this particular project, I really made good use of the patterns.
Because even this page doesn't have the logo. Who finds a Y finds a good thing. Just from the laugh shapes and the swells at the end of the G,
exactly,
I can automatically tell
that this is Adepa Weddings if you were to see it anywhere at all. So and this is why it's very important that you need to think beyond the logo that you are developing. And so I'll move on to the second project. The second brand I want to talk about is Africat. It was a project I completed not too long ago. It belongs to a friend who's starting an African market online. So that's what they call it, Africat. And for them, it was very important for them to have a certain vibe that is really African and is really relatable for Africans. And I think for Africa, one of the things that's really relatable for us is our patterns and our colors.
Yes, we love patterns.
We love patterns and colors. We are happy people.
It's very colorful.
So
both in and out.
So it runs through this particular identity, and so that is the mark. I would want to show you how it was applied, even beyond the logo, right? That's what we are looking at. And so with this particular project, the great thing about this project is that the logo itself has a lot of patterns at play. So it was even easier for me to blow that up into a pattern in general. Right, and so I created a pattern totally out of the logo itself. Yes, great. Yeah, and so naturally you are seeing so many versions of the logo in there, flipped in so many forms, and it is forming the pattern. And this made it so interesting because that's what we actually use for almost every other thing. When you pick their call cards, you are seeing the patterns all over it. When you pick their letterhead, you are seeing the patterns all over it. And so we are applying it everywhere. So in this project, I was thinking beyond the logo. I didn't want to be. I didn't want to just
boxed in by the
logo, but to be able to create a system like I'm talking about that creates a certain feel that even when I were to pick this logo and throw it somewhere, the patterns alone and the feel of the identity alone should be able to point that this is Africate, and that is one of the things that makes this project very interesting. So you look at their shirts and then you are seeing the patterns all over the shirts as well. And so for me, that is what I practice. I practice that a lot. I don't pay so much attention to the logo itself. Like I say, the logo can just be a circle. It can just be a circle. But the most important thing is how you are going to apply the entire system and the feeling and experiences that you are going to create through all the touch points. If someone were entering my office and I had a signage on the wall, the typeface, the colors, the shapes, the patterns, how are all of those how are all of those things coming together so that when people see it, they can easily create a connection with the brand, right? And so these projects go a long way to tell. I think when you put the link down there, you'll be able to see that it runs through almost every project that I work with. I'm always thinking beyond the mark itself and looking at the other things that can be created with the mark.
So you guys got to see an example of Daniel using things outside the logo itself. But it's very interesting because all along I've been thinking so deep and so like I've been stretching my mind across a lot of platforms, thinking it has to be so complicated. I need to find a way to incorporate the imagery, find a way to incorporate so many things. But with the two examples, I noticed you use just the typeface. So just the typeface alone has given you so much variation to create very different things. So it doesn't have to be so deep.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be so deep.
At the same time,
how deep can Google's logo be anyway? How deep can that logo be?
But you can do a lot.
Exactly. But there's a lot you can. How deep can Nike swoosh be? How deep? How deep can it be?
It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. So the next question is it's very related to this one in a way, but it's coming from two different types of people. So they're from the point of view of a small business owner and the point of view of a graphic designer. So let's go with the graphic designer's point of view. So from a graphic designer's point of view, right, this looks like a very high level thinking sort of thing. What advice would you give to designers who are diving into logo projects?
I think that
especially if the client is not paying enough, because this feels like it's something that involves a lot of thinking, right? You have to stretch your mind across a lot of things. Imagine designing this for a client who's a pain in the butt. What is the designer's obligation to make sure that they design a mark that goes beyond just the logo?
So I think it is so important that for logos, I mean, logos has its own characteristics. A logo has its own characteristics. We always say that at least you have to make sure that it's simple, so that it can easily be recognizable. Like I said, even in the beginning, it has to be simple. But achieving simplicity is a really difficult thing.
Very difficult.
Right? And you just have to make
sure
common
sense. It's not common at all.
Exactly. And it is so. I mean, one of the ultimate goals is be able to achieve something that is different from what you are seeing out there, right? Even though that one is also not easy to pull off. I mean, as a creative, there's a process that you have to go through to reach a logo that you are developing. Maybe that's not what we are even going to go into detail in this one. But I have always believed that anytime you get a client, right, the client hasn't watched all the YouTube videos that you have watched. The client didn't go to the design school with you. The client will definitely come with his or her own perceptions about certain things when it comes to logo. And so for me, it's so important that when a client comes, I have to be able to make sure that the client leaves more educated than they came. Right. So for me, I like to talk with you for you to understand the work I'm come to do for you. Right. Make you appreciate that what we are creating is an identity and not just a logo. And so these days it's so difficult for me to even accept projects where the person says, I just want a logo.
I want just to make the logo work on its own.
Exactly. I always tell them that a logo can't work on its own. So what are you saying? For me, I'll barely take a project that is just logo.
Just a logo.
Right. I'd like to develop the entire system anyway. So I think that the advice I give to most creatives out there who want to do identity. So I say who want to do logo, who want to do identity design is to make sure that even though it's not easy, they go the extra mile to create a system.
Even though they are paying peanuts.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that if you take once you are taking the job, make sure you are nailing it.
Okay.
Don't take the job and blast it in good. And when the other creatives see it and they are saying that, Charlie, this project is
it's not so cool,
and you be saying, Charlie, the client didn't pay.
The client didn't pay.
It's just an excuse.
Yes.
Make sure that it is two things. Or just make sure that you're nailing every project that you put your hands on.
Yeah.
If the money is too small and you don't want to take it, fine.
Don't take it.
Don't take it. If you think you want to take the money, then take it, but still nail the project.
You do your best.
Yeah, I think that it goes a long way to it goes a long way to the credit of you, the logo designer, because definitely the client will stand somewhere and say, this guy did it for me, whether he paid peanuts or he or she paid peanuts or not. So I think that you must attack every logo project like an identity system that is going to have so many functions and uses and touch points. And so it must be so open. The identity you are creating has to be so open that it can encompass every bit of the touch points that you are going to be dealing with, and can also grow with the brand as well. Yeah, that's what the advice I'm giving.
So from the perspective of the small business owner, the SME, how did they begin to grasp the concept of involving other things aside getting a designer to work on their projects?
Yeah, so someone made a statement some time back saying that not every, we are always seeing that branding, not every not every company needs a branding. Sometimes they are very small businesses. It's because a lot of people are tying branding to just logo design,
yes,
right? Which is a big mistake, right? I think we can spend another time even dissecting what branding really is, right? But I think that for small businesses, there should also be an easy way for people to identify you. It's as simple as that. People need to be able to identify whether you're a small business or you're a big business. How are people going to identify you? That's the question you need to answer. Are they going to identify you through a logo? Are they going to identify you through a service? We all believe that logos are the easiest ways that people can identify you. And so then it means that to a certain extent, it's important that you get something that represents your brand. Right. So I think that's simple enough for people to see that, okay, this is the brand I'm dealing with. Yeah. So whether it's a small business, whether it's a big business, it is important that in this crazy world where we are consuming over 100 brands each day, someone still identifies you. Yeah. That is the whole point. How you are going to get identified is something that you need to look at, but you need to be identified. And what's the best way to do it? It could be how you do your service, but your identity, your visual identity needs to play a role, because I mean we are all very visual people. Do you understand? Yeah. And so it is important that as a small business, you don't think so small in the sense of saying that
small business.
Yeah, you don't think so small that you'd say, oh, I just need a logo. I usually don't think that it is enough, like I'm saying from the beginning.
That makes
so
much sense. So I'm going to read some questions I had online.
All right, sure.
Because I added that anybody, because you're a very busy person, I don't think people would get the chance to see you on the regular and actually things that have been bothering you. So I'm going to look and find one question from somebody on Twitter. One question from a user on Twitter by the name T-Bag Creations. I assume he's a graphic designer. Yeah. His question to you is, how do you make sure you don't recreate someone else's logo, especially when it comes to iconic logo design? I'm not so sure what he's trying to say, but I feel like he's trying to ask about differentiation when you are just using the icon itself and not anything else.
I think that making sure you don't create someone's logo is honestly not very realistic. And this is why I think it is not very realistic, because there's even a website that actually shows logos that were created from two different parts of the world and they look so much alike. Yeah, it feels as if both creatives were in the same room. There's an article like that online. Maybe we'd have to find and share with them. It is so difficult because we are all influenced by a series of shapes, patterns, and ideologies and all of that. Sometimes we all tend to think along a certain direction. Yeah. So sometimes you would think that this identity is very original from your brains, and so you have done your sketches, you have done your iterations and everything, and after creating the mark, you realize that it looks exactly like what someone else has done. You know, so sometimes you cannot really, realistically, you cannot really make sure. The best you can do is sometimes maybe to upload the logo online. I think sometimes you can upload it on Google and see if there are any imagery like that. Or sometimes you can even type the keywords. Maybe if it's on house, you can type house logos and see some of the logos that are out there and make sure that whatever you're creating is very different from all of these ones, right? So I think for me, it's one of the processes I use in creating. If I have to create a logo on a particular thing, I actually go online and search for logos that have been created around that particular thing, and make sure I avoid all of those ones and I take a different direction. Yeah, so it might be one of the easiest ways to be able to. But just like the way I am thinking, someone else also thinking like that. Exactly. So that's why I'm saying that you can't be 100% sure. But I mean, with these things, you'll be able to create identities or logos that are one way or the other different from other people.
And I think it also makes sense because if it does happen that you create a logo that's similar to somebody, your identity system can never be similar.
Exactly.
Unless you're copying.
And so that's why we always say you need to think beyond the logo, right?
Because you can have two identical logos, but the way they are used in its respective fields are so different 100%. That you automatically know that these might look alike, but they're two
the rest of the system are two different brands. So that's 100% true. So that's why an identity system is important, really, and then the logo. You need to be able to think beyond just a logo design.
But then there are still people who are charging for just logos, right?
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are
people designing just logos. And
I mean, sometimes the hunger calls for it, right? Sometimes the hunger calls for it. There are people. Well, I mean, I like to be very realistic.
Okay,
so that is why.
It's true.
Sometimes the hunger calls for it. You know, like on a regular day, you are there, and you need money, and someone comes to you and says, "Charlie, I want to pay you 1,500. Develop just the logo for me. I don't want any of those things." I mean, for me, I'll still tell you, I think that you need to add this, you need to add that, you need to add that, you need to add that.
Build
an identity system. If the person thinks that it's a good idea, if I've been able to convince the person enough, and he says, "Let me add all of these things," and then I charge you for everything. But I mean, if at that point I really needed 1,500, I might probably go ahead and do it. Yeah,
and rid yourself of thinking even far beyond a logo.
Exactly. Maybe there are also projects that after developing the logos, I thought that no, I don't have to end here. Let me develop the system and then add it up to the project, because I felt that this logo,
you've come this far.
Yeah, I've come this far with this project, so let me develop the rest of the system. There are projects that I have done that I didn't even charge for the rest of the things, because I said this one day I need to do all of these things in addition as part of the identity system. Yeah. So there are people who are still charging. I'm hoping that with this education, a lot of people will be able to revise how they think about some of these things, so that they can involve the other elements in their
charge
process.
More and make more
yes,
money.
And even charge more. Yes, it's a way of upselling. I do the logo for you. I say, I can do this and this and this and that for you. So for some of them, I share other presentations from other projects, and they look at it and say, this is so cool. I want some of this. Yeah. And then you win them over. So I think that it always depends on you, the creative. You need to be able to find ways of upselling yourself and educating the clients. Right.
That was insightful. And the last question is coming from Dr. Payne. I don't know if the pronunciation is right, but he's Nana Kese on Twitter. His question is very, very interesting. In fact, it's super amazing. He's asking, when is the video coming out? So Dr. Payne,
that's a good question.
Yeah, if you're watching this video right now, it's out. Yes, it's coming out today. The time you're watching it right now. I don't know what day you're in, if you're on Monday or on Tuesday, but whenever you're watching this video, it's already out. Thank you so much. So I guess that wraps up the conversation about thinking beyond the logo. Going furthermore into recap, a little bit of advice that I've learned from Daniel, and in two different ways. One, towards new graphic designers or already existing graphic designers, is to make it sure that you think beyond using just the logo as a way of identifying your brand or the product you're working on. You can consider things like the fonts, which can also be morphed into other things like patterns and also other smaller elements that can identify your brand. You can consider things like colors and how they are used and where they are used and how they're going to help people differentiate between certain things. You can consider things like the mood of your imagery, whether they are very happy or vibrant or dull or black and white. All those things can help create a theme that, if used consistently, can help you create a more vibrant identity that people can identify even outside the logo. Yeah. This conversation gave me so much ideas about other things we should talk about. So I feel like we should also keep this conversation going. I'm going to invite other people. If you have any other questions that you want Daniel to answer for you, you can go ahead and leave them down below in the description so he can attend to them. I'll make sure that I find a way for him to answer all those questions I see in the comments. I mean, it's been great having you.
It has.
I mean, is there anything you want to add?
It has. Well, I was a bit skeptical the word. Yeah. When you told me that, I mean, let's do this. But I think it has been interesting.
It has been interesting.
It has been interesting, and I'm just hoping that more people get to learn. I mean, we are all in the learning process, right? But when you learn, you share what you have learned, and then you keep learning more. So I think that if anybody also has any inputs to what we have discussed, they can just put it in the comment section. We'll also definitely read them and then pick one or a thing or two from them as well. But
great.
But in all, it has been really good. It has been
great. So you designers out there, if you're just designing logos, you can make more money by now designing brand identity systems. I mean, it's that easy. All you have to do is add it into your invoice and explain. If they doubt it, you can point into this video, because who else is explaining it? Daniel Ampofo. No one will doubt Daniel Ampofo when he gives you an explanation. So there's that. To business owners, I really hope you guys start to think beyond the logo and find a way to involve other artisans and creatives in building your brand, photographers, logo designers, animators, brand identity developers. And if you were thinking you were just a logo designer, well, guess what? Today, you are a brand identity designer. So think wide, think smart. It's been awesome. I'm Joshua Cleopas. If you like the type of content I make, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, because more of these conversations is going to happen. We have other people in store, people in different industries like photography and filmmaking. They're going to come on the channel. We're going to have these type of discussions that we hope to dive deeper into certain things that people are not necessarily thinking about. Because like you said about the fact that we're in a day and age where there's a lot of things out there. I mean, you come in here, you met 50 brands, right? Yeah. So how do you make your brand stand out? These type of conversations are what I'm hoping to stir up so people can get informed. So like I said, thank you so much. Down below, don't forget to hit the notification button so you don't miss any video. Thank you so much for watching. See you later. Cheers. If you made it this far, right, because I'm assuming if you're watching this, you skip the intro bit, right? If you made it this far, Daniel doesn't know this, but I'm going to give him pressure to start his YouTube channel. Next week, he's posting his very first video on YouTube, and I'm going to add the link to that channel down below so you guys can go and subscribe and tell him that I sent you, because he has a lot of content about, you know something, I'm not going to tell you what it's about. Go and find out. Thank you so much. Catch you later.